Boy, am I glad I missed out on the MCU fad. What in the world did I just play? Was this, or was this not the single worst third-party exclusive developed for Nintendo consoles this generation? I can't think of anything else that Nintendo decided to make that was co-developed by another company, licensed from another brand that is still a Nintendo Switch exclusive. I can't think of anything that's come out recently, this generation, that fit that description, but this exists. You can look at it on the eShop. This was published by Nintendo. They co-developed this, apparently. This is absolute slop. On the other hand, though, this is a really interesting little experiment in which you take a mediocre, uninspired brand like Marvel and co-develop it with Nintendo, the premier video game developer in the industry. This could have been something a little bit interesting because the first two Ultimate Alliance games are cult classics. People really liked them for their mix of beat-em-up action and action RPG gameplay. You got to play as a bunch of well, I hate to say famous because nobody knows who any of these characters are, but you got to play as a bunch of different Marvel characters. The game had an audience, right? People like these games for what they are, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? They're mid-action games that appeal to a certain demographic that doesn't play real video games. And Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 is essentially coasting off of that demographic. This idea that you can throw a bunch of Marvel characters into a setting, have them say a handful of lines, and people will just become soy-faced, open-mouthed, just, oh man, I saw that guy in the movie, Again, this is why the Marvel brand frustrates me so much, because the characters aren't interesting, they don't have interesting powers, they're not fun to play, the game itself is lazy and uninspired, much like the Arkham games. But because it's Marvel, because it has a recognizable brand attached to it, what you end up getting is something that a lot of people bought just because of the brand name, in spite of all the very real, blatant problems with this as a concept. Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 has a ton of issues, from the terrible user interface, from the sloppy, repetitive combat, and the bare-bones story, which I feel essentially amounts to a bunch of Marvel characters showing up, giving a brief explanation as to who they are and their background before joining your alliance to become yet another part of the mob. There's no personality here, there's no depth, there's no creativity. It's just you and three other guys just running through these linear hallways, mashing Y and X until you beat Thanos and restore peace to the Marvel universe until the next time this happens. It's insane how I know next to nothing about Marvel. I've never seen an MCU movie. I've never picked up a comic book. I saw a couple of cartoons as a kid that I really like and enjoy and have fond memories of. I know nothing of Marvel. I don't know anything about the characters, the plot lines, or the stories. It's crazy how someone like me can play this and come away with this feeling that what I just experienced was unbelievably generic. This is the Marvel Ultimate Alliance. These are the most recognizable protagonists in the Marvel universe going up against a bunch of known antagonists. This is the best they could come up with. It's downright embarrassing how basic this game is. This looks less sophisticated than beat-em-ups in the 90s. It's embarrassing how poor this game looks. And it runs well, it's fluid, right? There's no issue with the performance. I've seen a lot of people claim there is, but there is not. This is just a mess at its core. This idea that you have about 20, 30 characters, all of whom level up independently, all of whom who you have to use to go through this infinite grind to unlock random recolors and some extra characters, right? This idea that you go through this game and just have nothing to show for it by the end. It's just appalling, especially bizarre. Like when you reach the end and beat the game and realize that a number of high-profile characters that you see throughout the adventure, people like Beast, Colossus, Cyclops, a lot of them don't actually join your party. Like a lot of them are just there to tease you and never actually join up, even if they're somewhat plot relevant. So essentially what you'll be doing is just playing as a bunch of like the biggest names in Marvel coupled with like a handful of obscure ones, and with some very glaring omissions. And what's more, you're basically fighting a bunch of antagonists who inexplicably seem fully capable of taking on 20 or 30 superheroes at once, because of, circumstances. Doc Ock can do it, Green Goblin can do it, Kingpin can do it. Like, you have all these guys who shouldn't be this strong, and yet somehow they're just stomping all of Earth's greatest heroes. It's like, huh? It just comes off as like unbelievably contrived. Like, why exactly are we all teaming up and like going all about this all at once? Like, why aren't we splitting up to accomplish our goals? Like, why exactly is everyone in the Marvel Universe doing something at the same time? Asgard, like the Dark Dimension, the mutants launch an attack on the Xavier Institute, like the thing that happened on the like this is all stuff that happens independently of each other. So you're really going to make me believe that like everything goes to shit all at once just because the Infinity Stones landed on, like, that doesn't matter. That doesn't mean anything. Like, it's like what is this plot? Like, what is actually going on? And it really needs to be stated, first and foremost, just how uninteresting the Marvel characters are as like a concept, because like their designs aren't great, their voice acting isn't great, their storylines aren't great. A lot of them are kind of cringy. The game has this really goofy tone to it, and it just doesn't really work at all, especially for someone like me who's like not familiar with any of these characters. Like, to me, playing this game, seeing this story play out, and seeing all these characters join the Marvel Ultimate Alliance, it makes them unbelievably lame. Like in the ending, you beat all of the bad guys one at a time, and then for some inexplicable reason, they all team up at the end and charge you one last time before getting one-shotted by Thay. Like, it's like... It's unbelievable just how little creativity this game has, just how repetitive it is and how reliant it is on the Marvel license. And I do think that really needs to be stated like pretty heavily here. This was clearly like an endgame thing. It's clearly leaning into like that hype cycle where like, people for like a month thought that Thanos was like the most original, like amazing villain ever. Oh, Thanos did nothing wrong. Like you have a lot of other cringe Marvel culture related things around that time period, like Wakanda Forever, and just like, just unbelievable, just cringy lines in this game. But what it all comes down to really is that this is a mediocre action RPG that simply just doesn't have anything going for it. Like, if you like the characters, you're not going to be happy at like the uninspired plot. If you don't care about the Marvel characters, you're not going to be like sucked into the world and like become fans of the verse or whatever. If anything, like playing this has kind of reaffirmed my opinion of just how much better something like One Punch Man or, other Japanese manga series are than this slop. The fact that they have so much better designs, so much better writing, like better character interactions, just more memorable moments, better fights in general. Like, nothing Marvel does could compete with that. Ever. And yet we're supposed to believe this is the peak of this genre of fiction. Like, this is the big American thing right now. Marvel. Like it's just unbelievable. It's just this is what people have been like talking about and getting excited over since 2007. It's unbelievable. It's embarrassing. I find myself cringing at just everyone who cares about these characters and cares about the verse and the lore and what have you. Like it's just the same thing it's always been. You know, like the heroes fight the bad guys in this never-ending battle, and it just never goes anywhere. It never becomes interesting. The characters don't grow or evolve. It's just some idealized fiction to appeal to shut-in nerds living in their mother's basement, right? Like this is the Marvel universe, right? This is who this is tailor-made to. You know, like I can't get over how this game just has has shown us all just how poorly constructed the Marvel universe actually is. But in regards to that, what is the actual game like? You know, what is Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 like as an actual video game? Well, it's essentially an action RPG beat 'em up thing in which you take a character and go through a number of stages defeating everything that stands in your way. You know, most of the enemies are disposable. They're all fodder, but the bosses at the end of each stage tend to have more interesting fight patterns. They tend to have a lot of interesting gimmicks. They tend to take a little bit more effort to beat, surprisingly so, considering the general overarching quality of the game. And you essentially move on to the next stage and you do it all again. And the more you use your characters, the more they level up and the more powerful their hits will be. And it's like, it's the worst kind of RPG because this game has no real strategy to it. It has no real skill. All you're doing is leveling up your attacks so you can deal more damage, right? You don't unlock new moves or new things you can do or like new properties to your moves. Like all you're doing is just hitting the enemy harder so it goes down faster. And because it takes so unbelievably long to level up, you'll be doing this for a long time. And so this game introduces the Infinity Rift, this series of gauntlet challenges in which you play through a lot of these levels again with under specific conditions to grind your characters and just endlessly do the same things over and over and over again forever. Like this is an extremely grindy game. You know, I would say this is probably one of the grindiest games I've played on Switch. And you know, maybe not as high as like Disgaea 5, but Disgaea 5 was way better than this. Like when you just look at the overall quality, like I feel as if the grind exists to make the game feel way longer than it actually is, because if you actually have powered up characters, if you have your alliance chart filled out, if you actually put in all this time and effort to like power up your alliance, you're going to be like stomping through the game like no matter what you do, right? Like it's insane just how much the characters can level up and how you still will have more things to do, because the Infinity Rift requires you to use certain characters sometimes, and all of them level up independently of each other. It's not like you take out four guys and the entire team starts leveling up. No, they only level up when you're playing as them. So in a lot of cases, you'll be spending hours and hours and hours grinding to get your characters up to a reasonable level. And when that happens, the boss goes down and you just do it all over again. Like, it is abominable in the sense because they could have done something with this. They could have made this interesting. They could have balanced it better. They could have made it more skill-based. They could have done a whole lot of things to, like, improve the AI and make the fighting more dynamic, but no, it's just unbelievably generic. To me, I feel like the game may have some appeal if you're like a stupid kid who likes Marvel and like wants to play with your friends. This game does have a feature 4-player co-op, which is interesting. Probably the ideal way to play though is if you have like three other people with you who are willing to like go through this slog and like beat up like Marvel's biggest names. Like, yeah, like I could see that being appealing to those people, right? But like I can't help but like, as an actual fan of games, like point out just the overall low quality of this. Point out the fact that Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 at its core is just not very well constructed. Its mechanics make no sense. It's too grindy. Like the visuals are trash. The story is trash. Like they could have done a lot more with this. And I'm very curious to see if Nintendo is interested in pursuing a sequel because I do think this game did fairly well. I believe it became a million seller. I believe that like Marvel fans were happy with it, reasonably happy with it. And I can sort of see why. The game does run fairly well. It does have some like reasonably well designed boss fights. Like to me, like all of the issues with this, when it comes to the grind, when it comes to like the polish, the UI, the general combat structure, like I think there could be a lot of work done on this to really improve the formula. Playing this, I really got the impression that like if the developers knew what they were doing, we could have had something a lot more interesting and something a lot more memorable. So I'm actually, although I'm definitely giving this game a thumbs down for what it is and like what it represents and like its overall quality, like I do think there's a lot of potential here. Like if they can actually get good writers on board and like make something that's actually appealing, they might have something here. Nintendo might actually have like their own unique Marvel spin-off series that's exclusive to their consoles. Now, that's not a guarantee or anything. This game is several years old at this point, but it's still a Switch exclusive, and there's been no word that it's ever going to get ported off the hardware. So this very well may be an instance of the beginnings of a partnership between Nintendo and Marvel. Now, that's kind of a reach considering what's been happening with the Marvel brand recently. But I do think it would be really interesting if Nintendo developed more projects like this. If they worked on projects that were licensed from brands that are popular in America and started developing new, interesting IPs based on those games. I've always wanted to play a Harry Potter game developed by them. I would love to see them tackle like other famous things. Like it's definitely something that really should be talked about and considered. But like the way things are now, it's safe to say that this game was a complete and abject disappointment.